Hi, I'm Julie. Welcome to my channel. And today like to talk about identification when you're foraging. Not specifically details, but advice on a guide. This is backwards for you. But this is Newcomb's Wildflower Guide by Lawrence Newcomb. And it's illustrated by Gordon Morrison. This book's about 22 years old, so I don't know if the cover still looks like this, and it's pretty battered. I studied environmental biology, and this is the field guide that I used later in my education. I feel like it's a really simple guide to use. This is the first guide I used. This is Plants of Michigan, a field guide by Richard Rabler, University of Michigan Herbarium. And it is also a nice identification book, but it's a little more difficult. It's a dichotomous key. So you run through a lot of different options. Foraging guides are great. It's really useful to find out what plants you can eat or what you can use them for or what parts of the plant, because sometimes you can't use the whole plant. So you just really want to be safe. But foraging guides, most of the ones I've seen, if anybody knows of any that encompass everything, please let me know, because I would like to see it and have one. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but I always feel like the foraging guides are lacking in identification. They might give you a little overview, but I believe that you need a separate identification tool so that you can properly identify what you're foraging. And it can be really dangerous if you misidentify and you consume something. So be safe. Proper identification is really important when you're foraging. You don't want to misidentify. I don't use the identification apps. I know there are some out there and they're probably fairly accurate, but I don't know if they're 100% accurate. And you also may be in situations at some point where you're not able to use an app. Maybe there's no service or your phone died and you need food or medicine. Who knows what your situation could be. But if you learn how to use the guides and learn about the flower parts, oftentimes you can recognize similar species to ones that you already know because they have similar physical characteristics. So this is how Newcomb's Wildflower Guide works. You have a locator key, and it talks about, like, this is irregular flowers, and it'll talk about different characteristics and if they apply to you. That's the page you go to. See, so it's still irregular flowers. This is flowers with 5 regular parts, and then it's the same situation. It asks about the leaves and the flowers. So any good guide will give you an explanation of the terms, and this is location of leaves. Like basil leaves are based at the bottom of the plant. Alternate means you have a leaflet on one side, then it's staggered all the way up. Opposite is just what that sounds like. The leaves on each side are opposite each other. These are whorl leaves, which whorl in the same position around the stem. And then leaf shape, which is very important in identification. So make sure you read all this information and all of the illustrations that show you. And there's an index in the back. So if you know what family your plant is in, but you just don't know what species it is, that way you can go directly to that section. There's a chipmunk in my rosemary potted plant. They keep digging in my pots. So it's frustrating. The dichotomous key, and there's an illustration of floral structure, types of inflorescences, flowers, very important in identification. And there's more leaf structure. So make sure you have some good information in these. Let me see if I can start at the beginning here. So this is woody plants. This just shows you how this works. So the first one, you choose which option your woody plant is, and if it's 1A, you go to 2, and then you make another choice, and so on until you get to your hopefully correct plant. If it's 1B, you go all the way to 30. There's a lot of questions. And then you make a choice at that point. So it's a little more intensive and a little more difficult, and you really need to know plant structure. And there are some points in the keys that you may actually have to cut open the ovaries and see how many chambers are in it. So both of these books are a little bit older. I believe Newcomb's is still in print. I looked it up. I don't know if the newer versions, if they've updated some of the scientific names, because botanists are always recategorizing. Scientists in general are recategorizing, and the more they learn about the plants, they might think they belong in another family. But if these don't work for you, find a guide that does. Find one that is simple for you to understand, because we don't all think and process the same way. And just make sure you get an accurate identification. That is the most important thing. I've heard of people using Peterson's guide. I haven't used that, but I would be open to checking that out too. When you are foraging, forage consciously, please. If something is endangered or rare, please don't collect it. Be conscious and make sure that we have those plants for the future. A lot of plants like echinacea was a widespread native prairie plant, and it was over harvested, and there was a lot of wild harvesting that occurred, and probably a lot of urban expansion too probably did not help the situation, but how often do you see echinacea, purple coneflower, out in the wild? You don't really, unless it's a restored prairie. So please be conscious and help take care of our nature and our earth. Thank you for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you next time.